Alright, so we've unwrapped the three objects you see with the checkerboard pattern here. We still have to unwrap the rest of the gun. So I'm going to go ahead and select that part of the gun and hide everything else. Before we actually start unwrapping this, we need to fix some more problems with the geometry. I know we did this in the first lecture, but I missed quite a few pieces here. Maybe you did a better job than I did, but I missed them, and I kind of want to go over what I missed in this lecture. And since some of these problems are actually a little trickier than I originally imagined, I'm probably going to spend this whole lecture just fixing the rest of this geometry, and then we'll try to unwrap and solve the atlas at the end with one more lecture. So I apologize. I probably got your hopes up in the last lecture, but I discovered some problems while practicing, and you know, it is what it is. So what I'm going to do is just fly into this thing and take a close look at all of the edges and make sure that all the geometry is exactly the way I want it to be. So I didn't do a very good job in the first part of this, and I didn't notice some of this stuff like this right here. I want to point out, if this was designed a little bit differently, so say for example, let's say I scaled this out a little bit, made it a little bit more rounded, and maybe even scaled it on the X inwards a little bit, you can see that this has a much more defined shape to it. But in the original place, it didn't really add anything at all to the geometry. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking for, and what we want to do with stuff like this is either reshape this, so maybe do something like this to justify the geometry, or just simply dissolve it and get rid of it. So in some cases I'm going to dissolve these edges, and in some cases I'm actually going to try to justify the geometry by reshaping it. So you can see another piece right here. I'm going to just dissolve that. And maybe this here, which it wants to have some purpose. If you look at this, it kind of comes up and it just barely changes the shape here. But what if this actually had a little bit more of a defining shape such as this? What if it scaled outwards like this? Then it might actually make more sense for that geometry to be there. But again, if you feel like you don't want to actually add geometry to this, you want to actually minimize geometry, then you just want to go in here and dissolve these edges. So I'm going to look through as quickly as I can and just make quick decisions. This one, again, I could bring this out here, scale it down. Then that makes this look much cooler. Over here like this, it's so faint, it doesn't even make sense to have that geometry in there. I'm going to actually dissolve it. Looking around some more. Make sure to look inside these crevices here. And oh, here's another little piece right here. I'm going to dissolve that. Don't need that. And should be another one on the other side. I've noticed a lot of stuff here. When you find one problem, you can probably find similar problems on the other sides of things. I've noticed that. So go ahead and dissolve that. Let's take a closer look inside of here. It seems like there's two edges inside of that. I'm not sure how or why or what purpose that's serving. I might just leave it. It doesn't seem to be causing any problems. What's weird though is that there's only one edge in here and there's two edges inside of here. If this causes a problem later, I might actually whatever. You know what? I'm going to get rid of one of them right now. So I'm just going to dissolve one of those edges, and then now there's only one loop in there, just like this. One thing that bugs me though is let's look at this in ortho view. I think I'm going to move this over a little bit because this is a pretty wide gap and I want this to be about the same. The other thing that I noticed too is that I want that seam to be kind of in the middle, so something like this is a little bit better for me. Now, I don't mean to be redesigning this guy's gun. I think he did a pretty good job, but I'm just thinking like this is going to look much better with these gaps opened up like that. And I'll do the same thing over here since we're editing that. So just kind of move this out like that. so we could see that inner line a little bit better. And that's pretty cool like that. So let's take a look at this edge right here. I don't mind this at all. It just comes straight down. That's fine. Any more? Just looking for double lines right now. Here's a double line right here. This one's kind of interesting because it goes around the corner. And I think what's going on here is this should be a flat face. But I noticed when I was practicing on this earlier, I noticed that it wasn't flat. So because this is not flat, I would have to triangulate this to fix it. But instead of triangulating that, why don't we just get rid of this edge altogether? So we'll go ahead and dissolve that edge first, and then select this face, and then the other face on the side that's in exactly the same position, and triangulate those. That way we don't have this edge there. That edge wasn't really doing anything for us before. Okay, moving right along, we have this part right here. It looks like there's a tight little crevice in here, and I think probably what I want to do with this is open that up just to make it easier to access. So maybe move this out a little bit. I'm not sure what's going on here, so I don't even know if that needs to be like that at all. Now that I look at it, it's not really a crevice at all. It's a it's just parallel seams. It's got a little bit of a drop off, but I think probably what I'm going to do with this, I don't know. Maybe what I'll do is scale this down a little bit to make it more dramatic. Again, justifying that geometry. Because before it was hardly noticeable. Plus, it was also very hard to select those edges. When it was that close together, it almost didn't make sense to have that extra geometry in there at all. But this way, it actually makes a little bit more sense. I'm going to leave it just like that. When we get to the end, I see one more edge over here that could be cleaned up. So I'm going to dissolve that edge. And I know that I'm going to mark this as a seam, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab that and mark it as a seam right now. Another one that I know for sure is going to be a seam is this edge right over here. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as a seam now. We covered the tip to the back of the gun, the top part. Now we need to do this part around the trigger and the handle. So let's take a closer look here. And you can see, I see a double edge right there. There should be one on the other side, but there isn't. I probably removed it in the first part of this lecture. So I'm just going to go ahead and dissolve that right now. So they're the same on both sides. I see this edge right here. If you look at it side on, it doesn't seem to be adding anything to this. But one thing I could do is just make this a little bit more rounded by just using these loops. So I'm just going to grab that and move it around just to kind of round off this edge. I think I'm going to do the same thing with this piece right here. Just kind of move it maybe down a little bit, maybe even rotate the angle of that so that it, again, justifies having that geometry. Because right now it really doesn't even make sense that this geometry even exists. But by doing stuff like this, it definitely justifies having those edges in the first place. This edge is fine. We can leave that. What else we got here? This edge right here can probably be removed without affecting the shape of this at all. So let's go and dissolve that. This one too probably can be dissolved. These are probably, well, I can see that this is holding this shape together. This one is probably needed because it connects with this little junction over here. I think I'm going to leave that. This is holding the shape together. This is also very important for the shape. This one here could be dissolved. Now when I did that, I'm going to undo. You can see that it changed the shape a little bit. So if that bothers you and you decide you want to keep that, that's up to you. Again, all of this is really up to you. It's your model. So I'm going to dissolve those edges because I don't think it's really adding much to the character of this object. Down on the very bottom, there's a few edges that could be dissolved. Or I could probably drag them down. Let's look at this side on. I could drag them down like this to add a little bit of character to the bottom. So I have a choice here, either dissolve those or drag them down. Now you'll notice when I drag them down, I didn't drag these lines with it. So let me undo that. Maybe select all of this at the same time and drag it all down together. One thing that I don't like about this is it's not flat. So what I could do is scale it on the Z to 0, and that'll flatten everything out. So when you look at it side on, now it's perfectly flat on the bottom. With all of that selected, I think I'm going to triangulate it. What this is going to do is it's going to notice that there's nothing connecting this corner right here, and this corner, and that corner. So this right here is going to be triangulated. This is going to be triangulated. This is going to be triangulated. You'll see. And everything comes together at a point, which is kind of nice. I'm going to leave that just like that. I noticed some other problems, specifically in this area right here. Let me see if I can kind of get in there a little. Right now, the problem is it's really hard to select the edge that's deep inside of there. So what I'm thinking is, let's move this over, at least temporarily, so that we can see inside of there. And maybe we'll move it back in just a moment, but this is the edge that I'm having a hard time selecting right here. And I think when I was just working in this a few minutes ago, there was some problems in here that I was having a hard time resolving. And I'm not sure if those problems have been corrected by moving all of this around or what's going on. But so the problem that I was dealing with is when I did a loop selection here. Okay, it's actually over here. It gets stopped by something in this crevice. And I have to pick up the loop over here. I'm not sure if this is going to cause problems when we unwrap, because I haven't actually gotten that far yet. But I really should take a closer look at this geometry right here to find out what's going on. So I'm going to fly in there and see what is going on in this area. It's kind of hard to get a close look, but let's review what the actual problem is. So the problem is, when you look at this thing side on, this edge right here gets stopped. So again, let's fly in there and take a look at those edges. It's stopping right there for whatever reason, I don't know. I think I got it. This edge right here could be dissolved, I think. You don't even see it on the outside here. To fly in to be able to see it. So there's two edges there. It looks like one of them could be dissolved. Let me see what happens if I dissolve that. So dissolve edge. Now let's go back out and see if the same thing happens. Ah, there we go. I got it. So that was actually kind of hard to figure out, but I don't know if you caught how I figured it out. I flew inside of this thing. I looked at the edge. I noticed that there was two edges here, and I dissolved one of them, and it kind of just put everything back together the way it kind of should have, I guess. Looks like there's two edges here as well. So I could probably dissolve one of them. It's not causing a problem. The loop is fine, but if I were to take a guess, I would say that this edge right here could probably be dissolved. And you can see it from the outside. So what happens if I select the other one? This one here. You can see that from the outside too. What I'm going to do is just choose one of them at random and dissolve it and see what happens. Notice that I have a clear view of it before I hit dissolve. I kind of want to see the geometry move. So I'm kind of cool with this. These are all coming to a point like that. It's kind of better than having two edges there. I'm going to fly through and see if there's anything else like that. I think it's just those two. Okay, so let's double check again, make sure that this edge loops all the way down. It does. This edge, that's pretty good. I think we're ready to actually start unwrapping this now. Everything else looks pretty good. Great. Okay, so in the next lecture, we're actually going to unwrap this thing. Hopefully it unwraps smoothly. I was having a hard time with it before, but I think now that we fixed that problem, it should unwrap a little bit better than what I was experiencing. So if you did not fix these problems in the same way, but you were able to actually get this thing unwrapped, congratulations. I'd love to see how you did it. I discovered these problems and fixed them. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. You probably could have achieved this without fixing those problems. But again, hopefully you picked up something new by watching this. Maybe you came here frustrated and were looking for a solution. If that's the case, go ahead and finish unwrapping this, and then we'll compare notes in the next lecture. I'll see you then.